Today on Rainbow Country, Academy Award nominated filmmaker David France. Stay tuned for Gay Talk Radio Toronto style right here on Rainbow Country.
Hi, I'm Mayor John Tory, and you're listening to CIUT 89.5 FM.
Rainbow Country may use words or phrases not suitable for all audiences. No matter who you are,
Hi, this is Carol Pope.
no matter what you do,
This is City Councilor Kristen Wong-Tam.
we all have a story to tell, and it starts right here on this gay radio show. We lift our voices, share our stories, and we'll raise our pride. I'm Mark Tara. Join me on this continuing journey through Rainbow Country. Well, hello everyone. Happy New Year. This is Rainbow Country, a little gay radio show that gives voice to the LGBT community. As always, I am your tour guide through Rainbow Country. I'm Mark Tara. So, get social, get interactive on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, at Mark Tara Music. Honestly, it's the best way to keep up to date with all things Rainbow Country, who's coming up on a particular episode, who's coming up on that particular month. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Mark Tara Music. So, do you have an interesting story to share? Well, I'm willing to hear. Send me an email and I will have you on the show. mark@marktara.com. The podcast for Rainbow Country is on iTunes as well as on Podomatic.com. And we were recently number 5 on Podomatic's Gay and Lesbian chart. Yay us! Yay! What a way to end 2017 and to start 2018. And again, everything is hooked up through my website, including the archives. marktara.com. marktara.com. So, this is episode 81. On today's show, I'm spotlighting Peabody Award winner and Oscar-nominated filmmaker David France. Now, Mr. David France, he has done 2 documentaries to date. 2012's How to Survive a Plague, which he won the Peabody Award for, and was also nominated for an Oscar for that particular documentary. His most recent documentary is called The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson. Now, this documentary is about the 1992 death of transgender legend Marsha P. Johnson, who was found floating in the Hudson River, originally ruled a suicide, but many in the LGBT community believe she was murdered. By the way, both films, How to Survive a Plague and The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson, are both on Netflix. I highly recommend both of them. By the way, watch them back to back. Great. Maybe 3-4 hours? Well spent. So my friends, are you ready? Because this journey through Rainbow Country begins right now.
Hi, this is Carol Pope on CIUT 89.5 FM.
We are in the middle of a plague. 40 million infected people is a plague.
AIDS is now the leading cause of death.
Demonstrators blocked access to buildings.
Coalition of gay groups came to shut down the FDA.
This government has the resources to deal with the AIDS epidemic, and they won't do it unless we force them.
We want everybody to join us. We are trying to arouse to anger and action.
Until we get our acts together, we are as good as dead.
I started to look for treatments to help save my life.
I wish they'd shut their mouths and get their mentality out of their crotches.
There was nothing coming out of our government's efforts.
But no, they march in the streets. They defy you.
I decided to become a full-time AIDS activist.
They all had to become scientists to some degree.
We can take a drug, your test tube, to the market in under 2 years. This total reluctance on your part is going to get you nowhere. It'll end up killing us.
The death rate just kept on climbing.
It became very clear that you weren't going to mess with these people.
I am going to fight them. My patients are going to fight them. And you're not welcome.
We need our government to save our lives. This isn't going to be cured for years and years and years. I'm going to die from this.
Someday, there will be a people alive on this earth who will hear the story that once there was a terrible disease and that a brave group of people stood up and fought, and in some cases died, so that others might live and be free.
He is an American investigative reporter, nonfiction author, filmmaker. He is a contributing editor for New York Magazine, a former Newsweek senior editor, and he's been published in The New Yorker, GQ, the New York Times Magazine. His first documentary, How to Survive a Plague, won the 73rd Annual Peabody Award. His documentary, How to Survive a Plague, was also nominated for an Academy Award. His current documentary is The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson, which is currently streaming on Netflix, and I highly recommend it. He is David France. Welcome.
It's my pleasure, Mark. Thanks.
So, Mr. David France, your current documentary is called The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson. And I'm interested in the title. And you chose Death and Life and the placement of that. Talk to me about the title of this documentary, a great documentary, The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson, when it comes to the title.
Well, of course, the film is about a great, kind of world-changing figure, and who met an unfortunate end in 1992, very mysteriously. And anybody who was in New York at that time remember that there was a large movement following the discovery of her body to bring justice to her case. And that movement staged demonstrations and exerted political pressure and went on for more than a year with remarkable mass demonstrations. And so her death has always hung over her history in a way that has been unfortunately lasting. So I wanted to tell her story, and I thought it can't be told, of course, without the mystery of her death. And so I chose to begin this kind of return to her legacy by starting with an investigation into what happened to her. Mm-hmm. And I did that because, in large part, I was in New York in 1992. I was an investigative reporter at the Village Voice at the time, and I had drawn the assignment to find out what could be known about what happened to Marsha. So I began my investigation into whether or not there was a crime surrounding her disappearance and death back then, and I wanted to see if I could use the passage of time to go back at it now and see what more could be learned.
Sure. So, like you just said, you're a very successful reporter, writer. How did you originally get into filmmaking?
Oh, I only started filmmaking a couple of years ago. And it was really by accident in a way. I had been working on a book proposal about the AIDS crisis and activism around AIDS, and I was hoping to begin work on a deep historical dive into that period of time between the discovery of the virus and the discovery of the medication that made it possible to survive an HIV infection. And I couldn't get anybody in publishing interested in letting me do the story. And it was 2008, 2009. The economy had tanked. Publishing was in trouble. And so I had a lot of time on my hands. And I thought, well, I'll try working with some old video and see if I could make a documentary. And that came out, that turned into How to Survive a Plague, which was my first outing as a documentary filmmaker. And that was so fun for me that I thought I should return to it. And this is my second film now, The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson.
Mm-hmm. So, David France, let's go back in time. Let's go back to the 70s. You came out in, the late 70s, early 80s?
Correct. And
my understanding is when you were in college, you went through conversion therapy?
I did, yes.
So talk to me. So first of all, what is conversion therapy? And talk to me about what happened to you.
Well, conversion therapy is a very discredited practice of, and now illegal in parts of the world, I'm happy to say, in which psychiatrists and psychologists purport to be able to change a person's sexual orientation.
Right.
From homosexuality to heterosexuality. We now know conclusively that it's not possible, and it is considered by the major regulatory bodies around the world to be cruel and harmful to people. But when I'm of a generation where that stuff was still going on, and,
right?
So my shrink put me into one of those programs, and I have to tell you that it did not have any lasting negative impact on me because I just did not take it seriously at all, and I knew it wasn't going to work, and so I had no buy-in. So luckily, it kind of glanced off of me without leaving any lasting injury. It was mostly silly, I have to say, and efforts to get me to sexualize female body parts.
Sure. Sure.
And it was just it really got no traction on me, I have to say. So I went through that for 6 months maybe before I thought this is a waste of everybody's time. So I returned to my ordinary life, but I still didn't come out. It took me a while, a couple of years down the road still before I came out.
Right. Why do you think you waited a couple more years to officially come out, do you think?
Well, I was living in a hostile part of the world, Western Michigan. It was the Bible Belt. I was going to college, to a college that was a religious-based school.
Okay.
And it had no LGBTQ student group. I didn't even know that there were LGBTQ student groups at other colleges. I was, that isolated. So it took me meeting quietly with other queer students to be able to think of the possibility of coming out and having a life lived openly as a gay person. And then we all kind of came out together all at once and started the gay group that's still ongoing there on the campus. So we're like the grandfathers and grandmothers of the LGBT community at my college.
Well done. Well done. So let's talk more about How to Survive a Plague. It won the 73rd Annual Peabody Award. It was also nominated for an Academy Award.
It was.
Talk to me about why you wanted to tell this story. Why this particular story?
Of course, I think you know that I arrived to New York in the summer of 1981, only 3 weeks ahead of the first reports of a mysterious illness that seemed to be stalking gay men. And so really my entire adult life has been intertwined with the AIDS epidemic.
Right.
I became a reporter in response to the epidemic. It was a time when everybody in the community felt a need to take some role, to assign themselves some positive facing task, and so I took on the role of journalist because I felt a need to see if I could find answers and see if I could find the people who are working on answers, and then promulgate that information to the community itself. So for all those years, I was covering it, and then when in 1996, 15 years into the epidemic, when it became possible to survive an infection because of the new medications that came out, the writing and storytelling and efforts to understand what happened in that time really diminished, and very little had been published or written looking back at that period to try to find what the lessons were, to try to see what we learned in the long run from the plague years of the epidemic.
Right.
And so that was my mission when I started first on the book project, which I couldn't get published, and then in the documentary. I wanted to show that I wanted to show the world that it took a heroic mass movement of people with AIDS, of gay people, of lesbians, and our allies to turn the entire epidemic around, and that there are heroes who are individually and collectively responsible for having saved millions and millions of lives, and those heroes are queer heroes, and they need to be celebrated, not just by us queers who knew it happened, but by future generations, and their stories need to be lifted up into the canon of kind of great historical figures, and that's what I wanted to do. And then after, I think you know that after the documentary came out, then I finally did get a book contract, so I was able to publish a history book about this
in 2016,
just a few months ago.
Yeah, and it became a bestseller.
Yeah.
I will say, in watching the documentary How to Survive a Plague, I learned that as a result of, these AIDS activists, these LGBT people standing up, having their voices heard, that it is as a direct result that we have the treatment today, the cocktails, that sort of thing. Fantastic.
Absolutely. What history shows us when we look back at that time is that it would never have happened on the time frame that it did happen. And I've often been asked, would science and pharma have arrived at these solutions on their own? And I assume that they would have, but I know that it would not have been in early 1996 when the activists, together with the research scientists, were able to bring the drugs on market. And every day, every week, every month, every year that there might have been a delay would have been hundreds of thousands more deaths.
Yeah.
So it was really an essential ingredient, this AIDS community activism, to bringing about, to rushing the drugs, to hurrying up the identification of the new drug compounds, to innovating brisk and humane drug trials to find out whether or not they worked, and then racing the drugs to market. And that was all done thanks to these activists.
And thanks to you, their stories have been told now, and people can watch this.
I think people are starting to understand what real acts of bravery and heroism went into that period.
Yes. So speaking of that period, let's talk about, let's get a little shallow, David France. Let's talk about the Academy Awards. Howard Girdler and yourself were nominated.
Yes.
For an Academy Award for How to Survive a Plague. Here's my first question in regards to that, and I'm as shallow as anyone else. Did you know that you would be nominated? Did you have an idea that you would be nominated for this documentary?
Well, nobody gets that nomination on the belief that they're going to get it. I think it always comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And it's always a surprise, and always is utterly flabbergasting. And I know that was true for us, and for all the other documentaries that were nominated in our year. We were speechless and terrified.
How did you find out?
Thrilled.
How did you find out?
We knew at what time the announcement would be made.
Okay.
And it was made in a live stream press conference from Los Angeles, and we were watching it in our various apartments through the city, and I'm sure you might have been able to hear our scream across the Hudson River when we found out that we'd been nominated.
Oh, my Lord. Okay, so my next question in regards to this very, important needing to know stuff. What did you wear when you went to the Academy Awards?
That was 5 years ago. And I'm not going to be able to remember, but I will tell you that I was invited to be styled, and I was at the same place that Neil Patrick Harris was styled. And, I wore my label proudly, whatever the label it was, and returned it promptly upon my return to New York City.
Okay. So did you get like a loot bag that was worth like thousands of dollars? Like, do all...
No, you know what? They don't give that to documentary filmmakers, it turns out. We're like the lesser of the Oscar nominees.
They ripped you off.
I know, but part of me was grateful because it turns out all of that stuff, it includes things like $20,000 African safaris and like these amazingly luxurious things, but all of that gets reported to the IRS. Those poor people have to then pay taxes on that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I would have to have paid taxes on a safari that I don't think I ever would have really wanted to go on. So I was lucky that I walked home with very little in the way of swag.
Yeah. So when did you walk the red carpet?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And how was that?
It was very cool. I mean to say it was very hot. It's 3 blocks long.
Oh, really? Okay.
And all of Hollywood and downtown Los Angeles is all cordoned off for the events that day. And then you just get deposited at the one end of this 3 block long red carpet, and it's it's kind of like a car wash. They move you from station to station, and you've got people kind of lifting you up and turning you around to point you to the next camera. And
wow,
you have very little agency along the way. But by the time you finally make it to your first glass of champagne, you really have earned it.
Oh, well said. What an amazing experience.
It totally was.
Your current documentary is called The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson.
I want to say it was the 4th of July. We were going to meet at midnight, but she never showed up.
She was in danger.
I was there when they pulled her out. Marsha was so full of life.
Marsha P. Johnson is the Rosa Parks of the LGBT movement.
Darling, I want my gay rights now!
Her case has been cold for 25 years. I'm calling from the Anti-Violence Project here in New York City. I want to try to give Marsha justice.
Marsha! Marsha! Street people and the drag queens were the vanguard of the movement. To Stonewall, Marsha and I fought the cops off.
We were in the streets turning over cars.
The movement started the next day.
Marsha was famous all around the world. But even famous people, cases go cold. This is her case.
It's hard for me to believe that she would commit suicide.
A lot of people think it was a murder.
Marsha had a fear about the mafia. Something's wrong. We keep on running into a brick wall.
You a private investigator?
No.
Don't play detective yourself, all right? Leave this to the people that should handle it.
We want justice here! To find out who the hell murdered Marsha!
I have been beaten. I have been thrown in jail. I have lost my job for gay liberation. Revolution now!
I don't bite my tongue for nobody, but you can get you murdered, you know.
The police just brush it off. I'll get to the bottom of it. There's a massive number of trans women who have been murdered. And they're yelling out from their graves for justice.
Did you actually know her?
I did, yeah.
And in what context did you know her?
Well, I first met Marsha. She was one of the first people I met when I moved to New York, and and that's not such a big surprise because she was such a dominant figure in gay life at the time. But I was actually introduced to her by a boyfriend, I think he was my first boyfriend in New York, Isaac Jackson, and Isaac Jackson was frankly concerned that I didn't have what it took to make it as a New Yorker. Mm-hmm. And having moved to New York from the Midwest. So he was giving me kind of a tutorial in life in the city and introducing me to the people I needed to know and to life's lessons in how to survive the city. And one of the first people he introduced me to was Marsha, mm-hmm. because Marsha was in the business at the time of selling fake subway tokens. And for $5, you could buy a huge bag full of these things that would last you, most of the year, by throwing these like fake slugs into the subway turnstiles. Mm-hmm. And that way, in Isaac Jackson's view of the world, I would be able to afford my life in New York.
Okay.
And so, and I became a customer of Marsha's then. But kind of more germane, I guess, is that she was always on Christopher Street, and at the time, Christopher Street was the mountaintop of gay life in the world, I think. And if Marsha was there, and if she called out your name, or if she said "Hi, doll" to you, you felt as though you had a home. And in an important way, Marsha was the person who helped me become a New Yorker.
Wow, well said. Why did you want to make this documentary, The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson?
Well, as I said, I had started reporting on her case and never really finished it. So I always felt a bit of a burden of responsibility. Okay. No one else had gone back to kind of dig deep into the mystery about Marsha and to try to hold authorities accountable for the work that they did or didn't do and trying to investigate her case.
Mm-hmm.
But I was reminded of Marsha when I was making How to Survive a Plague, because Marsha was, at the time of her death, an AIDS activist, and on the peripheries of the various grassroots AIDS organizations. And the footage that we pulled together for that first film had Marsha in it all over the place, and it allowed me to sit with my editors and explain to them what happened to Marsha, and who she was, and what a significant figure she was. Mm-hmm. And so, with their encouragement, we started pulling footage of Marsha from those old drives that we had gathered back in 2009, 2010, setting it aside for this next documentary.
Right. So, David France, as you know, there's a little bit of controversy that's surrounding this documentary. And
there is, unfortunately.
Yeah, and there's a great article on Jezebel.com that's called "Who Owns Marsha P. Johnson's Story" by Rich Jesuiak. I think I'm saying his last name right?
Mm-hmm. Very nice, yeah.
And I'd like to ask you a handful of questions in regards to this controversy.
Sure.
And I'm going to suggest that the listeners go to Jezebel.com, just Google it, and check out this article because it breaks it all down and sets the record straight, in my opinion. So basically, the controversy started with Rena Gossett, who's a filmmaker and trans activist. She has a filmmaking partner, Sasha Wurtzel. And in a nutshell, they're claiming that you took their research, their idea, and then Janet Mock also stepped in, claiming that your documentary was based on Rena Gossett's work.
That's right. She amplified their voices, right?
Exactly. And again...
Right. Well, yeah, of course, in the article you point to lays out the truth, which is that I didn't know about their work when I started on mine.
Right. So let me
that there's no DNA from their project in my project, and their project is utterly different. You know, it's a scripted and experimental feature, narrative feature, short. It's a 10-minute long piece, and mine is a feature-length documentary. So there's no relationship whatsoever between them.
Right.
And but as they are young filmmakers, this is, I think, will be their first film. They've been working on it for years. It's not quite done, their 10-minute film, which is a mystery to me and to many, I think. But
it's called Happy
young
Birthday,
filmmakers
Marsha.
Often come to the conclusion that their work has somehow sparked other people's work without really having the understanding of these kind of multiplicity of ideas and culture. This year alone, there are 3 films about the riots in 1992 in Los Angeles, and they were developed simultaneously and independently of one another, just like the O.J. films from last year. The 2, in fact, they were both miniseries of O.J. films, and that's obviously what happened here. And they just, I think, have not been able to see that it was just kind of a coincidence that their film that they're struggling on might be happening at the same time as somebody else's film.
So I want to ask you some specifics. And again, I'm turning the audience to the Jezebel.com article. So my first specific question is that Rena Gossett says in her Instagram posting that you are unfairly profiting off of her ideas and work. And my question to you...
She has failed to show where those ideas and work are or how they're represented in my work. So it's kind of a broad-based, cri de coeur, I think.
Yeah. So my question to you is, have you actually profited from this, or has this documentary actually left you in debt?
Good question. In fact, there's been a lot on the internet about my newfound status as a multimillionaire as a result of this film, which I only wish were true. This film, like almost every documentary film, is made, as a labor of love.
Right.
We brought the film and placed it on Netflix as our sole distributor for considerably less than it cost to make the film. And but we were lucky to find somebody who was going to help us find a large audience for it. So these 2 films that I've made, and I think this is common for all films, are leave us in debt.
Right.
And in this case, it's left our production company in debt, and we'll look for donors who help fill in those holes for us.
Right. Now, my understanding is that you were actually in touch at one point with Rena Gossett and Sasha Wurtzel, and the two parties were actually in communication at one point.
Yeah, at some point I learned that they were making a film, and somebody said, you should reach out to them, and maybe there's reason for you to work together. So I called them, and that's was our only conversation, I think, and it was a discussion about what they were working on versus what I was working on.
Right.
And they were not working on a documentary, and I was working on a documentary,
Right.
and we saw them as complementary pieces. In fact, I helped, they had a succession of producers working on their project, and I helped their producers in introducing them to possible funders.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we were generating, we had quite a large machine to produce that film, probably 60 people from start to finish.
Mm-hmm.
Who worked with us on the film, and we had created pathways to funders who were interested in the origin story of the transgender movement.
Right.
Were interested in these two, civic leaders in particular.
Mm-hmm.
That's Marsha Johnson, and her partner in politics and life was Sylvia Rivera.
Right.
And so we shared those introductions with that team as well. So we were trying to be collegial about it, and
Right.
And trying, because our mission was to uplift the legacies of these early activists.
Yes.
We wanted to help them help us with the same goal.
And you actually, at one point, introduced Rena Gossett and Sasha Wurtzel to you were just saying, one of your funders and a producer on The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson, Joy Tompkin. And Joy Tompkin actually donated money to their project of about maybe like $5,000. And there's
She did, yeah.
Yeah, and there's even, and again, this is all from the Jezebel.com article. And there's an email from Sasha Wurtzel, and this is a quote from that email. And this is in Sasha Wurtzel's words. "We are very excited to move forward and to continue to be in touch with you and David about the progress of our films." And that was from Sasha Wurtzel on May 6, 2015. So my last question, essentially, in regards to this controversy is, why do you think it came to this?
That's something I can't really say. When we started making our way to our premiere on Netflix in October, we were generating a huge amount of press attention.
Okay.
Across the board, strong reviews for the film, and a lot of real excitement about that day that the film was going to drop on Netflix. I think that the weekend before, we had something like 250 news hits across North America.
Wow.
For our drop date, and who knows how many we had in other languages that my computer doesn't know how to search for. But so it was a moment of great kind of publicity and excitement, and I think that it must have been painful for Rain and Sasha, who have not yet finished their film, to see themselves in comparison to that amount of press. I think, and I think that their irritation must stem from that. And I know that if I were still laboring to finish my project and they were hitting the market to great acclaim, I also would have felt upset.
Right.
Now, I wouldn't make dubious claims, but I can imagine feeling not good about it.
Well, I will say personally, thank you for making the film.
Thank you.
It's a great film. What's coming up for you in 2018?
Good question. We are now gearing up for production on a new documentary, about which I'm not saying much, except that it's about refugees.
Okay.
And we are really excited about it, and hopefully we'll finish it by this time next year.
Wow, something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Are you looking to theatrically release The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson?
Well, so here's the problem with that question, and it's the problem with Netflix. When Netflix picks up a film, they want it only on their platform.
Okay.
And when I make a film, I really have this goal of putting it up on the big screen.
Right.
Now, documentaries don't make any money on the big screen. Everybody knows that. But one likes to see their film there. My first film, How to Survive a Plague, hit 50 cities in North America. But unfortunately, it didn't draw enough ticket buyers to cover its costs in doing that. And in fact, the people who have come to see How to Survive a Plague have all come to see it on Netflix.
Okay.
So when Netflix came to us for this film and said, we want to do it here and only here, I thought, you have to swallow a certain kind of artist's pride.
Right.
But what they were offering was something that nobody else could offer. They dropped October 6th in 191 countries simultaneously.
Wow.
Translated into 18 languages.
Mm-hmm.
And we, with publicity all around the globe, drawing people to watch the documentary, and my goal was to make people know the names Marsha Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, to make people know that they should celebrate the legacies of these two transformative figures.
Mm-hmm.
And no better way to do it than through this partnership with Netflix. So it was a trade-off, and I made that trade-off decision myself, but I think it was the right one.
Well done. David France, thank you so much for your work. Thank you for doing How to Survive a Plague, the best-selling book, and this current documentary. Thank you so much for doing what you do.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thanks for letting me talk about it.
I'm Susan Gapka, and you're listening to CIUT 89.5 FM.
And welcome back. You've tuned in to Rainbow Country, and I'm your tour guide through Rainbow Country. I'm Mark Tara. So that was my spotlight on Oscar-nominated filmmaker David France. And as a side note, I did reach out to Rena Gossett, but as of today, she has not returned my email. So there's that. So, shall we have a little bit of music? I think we shall.
It's not time to hit your take a minute and shout out everybody who's supporting this community. LGBT, stand up. I'm writing this letter, hoping things will get better. I'm happy now, even if it's with the same gender. What's it truly matter? What's it truly matter? I'm writing this letter, hoping things will get better. I'm happy now, even if it's with the same gender. What's it truly matter? What's it truly matter? I knew when I was younger there was something a bit different. My cousin, I wanted to be a spitting in my jungle. Never played around with dress up, never put on makeup. Then I hit the teen years. Tried to hide my feelings, but I knew it wasn't me. I was scared out of my mind to tell my family. Something that takes courage and a lot of bravery. I built it up and told them, then they said, what did you expect? I love you no less. I'm speaking for the ones whose families leave them homeless. This song did. Speaking for the ones whose families leave them homeless. This song did. It's not how it's supposed to be. I'm writing this letter, hoping things will get better. I'm happy now, even if it's with the same gender. What's it truly matter? What's it truly matter? I'm writing this letter, hoping things will get better. I'm happy now, even if it's with the same gender. What's it truly matter? What's it truly matter? Some people swore it was a phase, but could you tell by the smile on my face, the sparkle in my eyes? This is me, this is my life. Could you tell by the smile on my face, the sparkle in my eyes? This is me, this is my life. See, I'll take it stand and say it isn't wrong. That's the whole meaning behind the song. Everybody has their views, but don't let nobody take yours away from you. Girl, you wanna be with a girl, boy, you wanna be with a man, just take a stand. Girl, you wanna be with a lady, boy, you wanna be with a man, just take a stand. There's nothing to be ashamed of, as long as you feel in love. There's nothing to be ashamed of, as long as you feel in love. I feel like no one understands until I take a stand. Standing ground, stay strong, stay beautiful. I'm writing this letter, hoping things will get better. I'm happy now, even if it's with the same gender. What's it truly matter? What's it truly matter? I'm writing this letter, hoping things will get better. I'm happy now, even if it's with the same gender. What's it truly matter? What's it truly matter?
I know I shouldn't fall for you, but who gives a shit about what people think? 'Cause every little thing you do, the way you said hey, are you down for a drink? Yeah, so come over tonight if that's okay. We got things to worry about. I just need you here for now. So come over tonight if that's okay. We can try and take it slow. Promise me you'll stick around. Let me love you, bring your body close to mine. Hold me and just breathe me and make me alive. Let me love you, bring your body close to mine. Hold me and just breathe me and make me alive. You know that I believed in you when I tried to run my fingers down on your spine. And maybe I don't see this through, no, but I'm so fucked up. Convince me I don't need anybody else at all. So come over tonight if that's okay. We got things to worry about. I just need you here for now. So come over tonight if that's okay. can try and take us home. Promise me you'll stick around. Let me love you, bring your body close to mine. Hold me and just breathe me and make me alive. Let me love you, bring your body close to mine. Hold me and just breathe me and make me alive.
And welcome back. So in that musical set, we just heard, right there, Alex T.B.H., Alive. Before that, we heard Jazzy J, This Letter. And starting off this set from recording artists that are all part of the LGBT community. Kind of awesome. We heard Weatherstone, Hello, London. Don't forget, get social, get interactive on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, at Mark Tara Music. Send me an email, mark@marktara.com, especially if you want to be on the show. The podcast for Rainbow Country, as always, is on iTunes, as well as on podomatic.com. And again, everything is hooked up through my website, marktara.com. Next week, from Indigo Girls, Emily Saliers. Finally, I want to take this time to thank you for taking your time to be with me. Remember, we live in days of making dreams come true. So believe in yourself, and the world will believe in you.
This is City Councilor Kristen Wong Tam, and you're listening to CIUT 89.5 FM.